The crowd was laughing, not the warm kind of laughter, not the joyful kind that filled the school playground during the Father's Day celebration. This laughter was sharp, cruel. It cut through the air like broken glass. In the middle of the school courtyard, decorated with blue and gold balloons and handmade Happy Father's Day posters, a small 12-year-old black girl stood completely frozen. Her hands trembled at her sides. Her worn-out shoes were dusted with dirt. Her dress, washed too many times to remember its original color, hung loosely on her thin shoulders. Her name was Amara Johnson, and right now she was being destroyed in front of everyone. A tall boy pointed at her from the front row of the stage. "Hey, where's your dad, Amara?" He shouted loud enough for the microphone to catch his voice. "Oh wait, does anyone even know who he is?" Laughter exploded again. Another girl cupped her hands around her mouth and screamed, "Maybe he's too poor to show his face. Or maybe he ran away like her mom's dignity." The crowd grew louder. Phones came out. Videos started recording. Amara's eyes darted across the sea of faces, parents, teachers, classmates, searching desperately for one kind expression. There was none. Her lips trembled. Her chest tightened. Her vision blurred. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. On the stage beside her, the event organizer, Mr. Collins, a sharply dressed man with slick black hair and cold eyes, leaned down toward her with an irritated sneer. "What's the problem?" he hissed into the mic. "This is a Father's Day event. If you don't have a father to celebrate, then maybe you shouldn't be up here wasting everyone's time." The microphone amplified his voice. Every word struck like a slap. Gasps rippled faintly through the crowd, but they were quickly drowned out by more laughter. Amara felt her knees weaken. I just wanted to give the card," she whispered, clutching a folded piece of paper in her shaking hands. Mr. Collins laughed into the mic. "A card for who?" He scanned the crowd theatrically. "Someone step forward if you're this girl's father." Silence. Not one man moved. The laughter returned louder than before. Amara's fingers unclenched. The handmade card slipped from her hands and fluttered to the stage floor. Her heart shattered with it. Then suddenly a calm, powerful voice rose from the back of the crowd. "That's enough." The laughter faltered. Mr. Collins squinted toward the sound. A tall man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped forward through the stunned parents and children. His presence was quiet but commanding. His hair was silver at the temples. His posture was straight. His eyes cold with controlled fury. Every step he took toward the stage felt heavy, intentional. The crowd parted for him without understanding why. Mr. Collins scoffed. "Sir, this is a school event. Parents only on the stage." The man didn't stop walking. "I said," the stranger repeated calmly, "that is enough." Something in his tone finally silenced the entire courtyard. He climbed the steps slowly and stood beside Amara. She flinched when she felt his presence, afraid that another stranger was here to humiliate her. But instead, he removed his jacket and gently draped it around her shoulders. Amara's breath caught. The man lowered himself to her level. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said softly. The warmth in his voice nearly broke her. Mr. Collins let out an annoyed laugh. "Oh, please, are you her dad or something? Because if not, I suggest you step aside before you embarrass yourself too." The man stood up slowly. His eyes never left Mr. Collins. "You just humiliated a child," he said quietly. "In front of hundreds of people." Mr. Collins shrugged. "And that doesn't make you special, sir. You're interrupting an event hosted by—" Before he could finish the sentence, the man said 6 words that made the color drain from Mr. Collins' face. "I own this entire foundation." The crowd gasped. Phones shook in trembling hands. Murmurs exploded like a sudden storm. Mr. Collins staggered back like he'd been punched in the chest. "Why, you're lying," he stammered. The man leaned closer. "My name is Richard Grayson," he said, "and in the next 5 minutes, you're going to wish this lie was true." Amara looked up at the stranger in confusion. She didn't understand the words. She only felt something she hadn't felt all day: safety. But little did the cruel event manager know, his life was about to be turned completely upside down. Because the billionaire standing beside this little girl knew a secret about her past, a secret powerful enough to shock everyone in this crowd, and change Amara's life forever. Let's go back to how this story truly began this morning. The sun had barely risen over the cracked rooftops of Eastwood Alley when Amara Johnson opened her eyes. Morning always arrived early in the slums, not because people were eager to wake up, but because survival demanded it. The thin metal walls of their one-room home trapped heat during the night, making sleep shallow and restless. The distant sounds of honking buses, barking dogs, and shouting vendors seeped through broken windows long before daylight fully arrived. Amara rubbed her eyes and sat up slowly on her mattress. a flattened patch of foam laid directly on the cold concrete floor. She turned her head. On the other side of the room, her little brother Eli, only 4 years old, slept curled beside their mother. His tiny chest rose and fell fast and uneven, like he was running even in his dreams. A thin cough escaped his lips. Again, then again, Amara's heart tightened. She quietly stood up and walked over, placing her small hand on Eli's forehead. Warm, too warm, her mother, Naomi Johnson, stirred weakly, her eyes opening with effort. "Amara," she whispered. "Sweetheart, is it morning already?" "Yes, Mama," Amara said softly. "Eli's burning again." Naomi pushed herself up with shaking arms, already exhausted before the day even began. Skin looked pale beneath her dark complexion, and the deep shadows under her eyes told the story of too many sleepless nights. "I'll get the cool cloth," Naomi said. Amara rushed to the cracked sink in the corner and soaked an old towel in cold water. She wrung it out carefully and placed it on Eli's forehead. The boy whimpered but didn't wake. Naomi watched helplessly, her lips trembling. "He needs medicine," she whispered. "The fever hasn't broken in 2 days." Amara nodded, trying to be brave. "I know, Mama, I'll find a way." Naomi grabbed her daughter's wrist. "No," she said firmly but weakly. "You're just a child. You shouldn't carry this burden." Amara forced a small smile. "But I'm the only one who can write now." Their father had died 3 years earlier in a factory accident. The company never paid compensation. Since then, Naomi's health had steadily declined. She worked when she could, cleaning houses, washing clothes, until her body finally gave in. Now everything rested on Amara's small shoulders. School came second, survival came first. Amara washed her face, slipped into her worn dress, and tied her faded sneakers with careful fingers. Before leaving, she picked up a small cardboard box from under the mattress. Inside were coins, all she had collected for weeks after helping neighbors carry groceries, after sweeping storefronts, after doing homework for younger kids. She tilted the box. The coins clinked softly. Not enough. Not even close. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'll be back before noon," she said. Naomi nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the morning wind carried dust and the smell of street food. Children in clean uniforms laughed as they passed her on their way to school. Some stared at her worn clothes, some whispered. Amara kept her head down. Her first stop was the local pharmacy. She stepped inside nervously. The man behind the counter barely looked at her. "I need fever medicine," she said softly. "Little brother, you got money?" he asked flatly. She poured her coins onto the counter. They spread in a sad little circle. The man pushed them back without counting. "Come back when you have enough." "But he's really sick," Amara pleaded. "He can't breathe at night." "Not my problem," the man snapped. "Move." Amara gathered her coins, her hands shaking. Her second stop was the Community Aid Center. A sign read, "Closed for staff training, reopens Monday. Today was Saturday." Her third stop was her school. She stood outside the gate, staring at the colorful banners tied to the entrance. Happy Father's Day celebration. Parents were arriving in expensive cars. Some carried wrapped gifts. Others walked in laughing with their children. Amara's chest tightened. She had finished writing her Father's Day card the night before, after Eli had fallen asleep, after Naomi's coughing had quieted. She had written the words slowly, carefully. "To the man who protected my family when my father could not. I don't know your name, but thank you for being our guardian angel." It was the only gift she had. Because her teacher had told the class, each student must present their card on stage with their father or guardian. Amara didn't have one, but she had still made the card. She didn't know why. Maybe hope, maybe desperation, maybe because deep inside she believed someone out there still cared. She stepped nervously through the gate. A teacher noticed her. "Amara, why are you here?" the woman asked, surprised. "You didn't submit a parent name." I wanted to give my card," Amara whispered. The teacher sighed. "Fine, just stand at the back." Amara nodded quickly and walked inside. The event began. Children went on stage one by one. "Happy Father's Day, Dad. You're my hero." "I love you, Daddy." Applause followed every child. Amara stood at the edge of the stage, clutching her card tightly. With every passing minute, her hands shook harder. Then suddenly, "Next, Amara Johnson," the announcer called. Amara froze. Every eye turned to her. She took one step, then another. Her legs felt heavy like stone. She reached the microphone and stood alone under the bright stage lights. The silence grew uncomfortable. The announcer leaned in. "Where is your father, dear?" Amara swallowed. "He passed away." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The announcer frowned. "Then your guardian?" Amara hesitated. "I just wanted to give the card," she whispered. That's when the mocking began, and everything fell apart. Back in the present moment of humiliation, as laughter crushed her on the stage, Amara's thoughts raced wildly. I just wanted medicine for Eli. I just wanted Mama to stop crying. I just wanted someone to care. Tears slid down her face as the cruel voices echoed around her. And that was when a stranger's voice rose above the noise. That's enough. Amara stood frozen beneath the blazing stage lights. From where she stood, the crowd looked endless, rows upon rows of faces, some curious, some amused, many already dismissive. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. The handmade card trembled between her fingers like a fragile leaf in a storm. She could still hear the announcer's question echoing in her ears. "Where is your father, dear?" Her lips had barely formed the words, "He passed away," before the atmosphere changed. At first, it was just a few snickers, then whispers. Then laughter spreading like fire through dry grass. A boy in the front row nudged his friend. "She doesn't even belong here," he muttered loudly. Another girl stood up halfway from her seat. "Why would she come to a Father's Day event with no father?" she scoffed. "That's embarrassing." Amara felt her chest tight. Her eyes searched desperately for a teacher, an adult, anyone who might stop this. No one moved, no one spoke. The announcer shifted awkwardly, uncertain, but said nothing. Then Mr. Collins, the event coordinator, strode onto the stage with fast, irritated steps. His polished shoes clicked sharply against the wooden platform. He leaned toward the microphone with a tight, forced smile. "Let's keep things moving, people," he said. "This is a celebration after all." He turned to Amara with cold impatience. "Where is your guardian, young lady?" Amara swallowed, fighting the tears burning behind her eyes. I don't have one," she whispered. A ripple of gasps followed, then laughter again, louder this time. Mr. Collins' smile faded. "So you have no father," he said flatly, "and no guardian." He looked out at the crowd. "Then why are you on this stage?" Amara tried to speak. Her mind screamed 1,000 things, about Eli's fever, about her mother's pain, about the medicine she couldn't buy, but her voice refused to come out. "I just wanted to give the card," she finally said, barely audible. Silence fell for half a second. "Then a card for who?" Mr. Collins snapped. "Your imaginary dad?" The crowd burst into cruel laughter. Amara flinched, her fingers clenched around the card so tightly that the paper bent. She felt small, invisible, useless. Then one of the boys from earlier stood up and pointed at her. "Maybe she came to beg for money instead," he shouted. Another voice joined in. "She probably wants someone to adopt her." More laughter. Amara's vision blurred with tears. She took a shaky step back, but Mr. Collins stepped forward, blocking her path off the stage. "You don't get to waste everyone's time and walk away whenever you feel like it," he said sharply. "This is a formal event." Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Sorry doesn't make you belong here," Mr. Collins cut in. That's when the worst blow landed. A girl with braided hair called out from the crowd, her voice sharp with mockery. Maybe her dad left because he didn't want her. The laughter exploded again, louder, harsher, merciless. That sentence shattered something inside Amara, her grip loosened. The card slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the stage floor like a wounded bird. Her shoulders shook as silent sobs racked her small body. She lowered her head, trying to disappear, but even that mercy was denied. Mr. Collins looked down at the fallen card with irritation, nudged it with his shoe, and said into the microphone, "This is pathetic." The word echoed. Pathetic. Amara felt it crash into her chest like a stone. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. From the crowd, some parents exchanged uneasy glances. A few looked uncomfortable, but not one of them stood up. Not one voice rose in her defense. Fear of embarrassment, fear of conflict, fear of getting involved. Their silence became the loudest cruelty of all. Amara's breathing turned shallow, her head spun. She thought of Eli burning with fever. She thought of Naomi barely able to stand. She thought of the coins in the cardboard box that weren't enough. "This is all my fault," she thought. "I shouldn't have come." Her knees buckled. She would have fallen, but suddenly a powerful, calm voice rose from the back of the courtyard. "That's enough." The laughter stalled mid-air. Confusion rippled through the crowd like a sudden change in wind. Mr. Collins frowned and leaned forward. "Who said that?" The voice came again, stronger, clearer. "I said that's enough." A tall man stepped forward through the sea of stunned faces. He walked with slow, deliberate confidence, as if the entire crowd naturally made way for him without anyone understanding why. His suit was perfectly tailored. His hair was silver at the temples, and his eyes burned with quiet authority. Parents instinctively moved aside. Children stopped whispering. Phones trembled in frozen hands. With every step he took, the noise of the crowd died further. Amara lifted her head slightly. She saw him approaching, but her fear was so deep that she assumed he was just another person coming to judge her. The man reached the front of the stage. Mr. Collins scoffed loudly. Sir, this is a private school event. Only authorized parents and staff are allowed on stage. The man looked up at him. His gaze alone made Mr. Collins falter for half a second. He ignored the comment and climbed the steps. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Amara instinctively flinched as he approached her. But instead of shouting, instead of mocking, the man slowly removed his suit jacket and gently wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. The warmth stunned her. His hands were steady, careful, kind. Her sobs grew louder as the wall she had built around her pain finally cracked. You're safe now, the man said softly, lowering himself to one knee so he was eye level with her. No one is allowed to hurt you like that. Amara stared at him through tear-filled eyes. Why are they so mean? She whispered brokenly. I didn't do anything wrong, the man's jaw tightened. No, he said quietly, you didn't. Mr. Collins burst into mocking laughter behind them. This is unbelievable, he sneered. Who do you think you are, playing hero in the middle of my event? The man stood slowly. He turned toward Mr. Collins with dangerous calm. You publicly humiliated a child. Mr. Collins shrugged. She embarrassed herself. The man's eyes hardened. She came here with hope. You crushed it. A murmur rippled through the crowd now. Mr. Collins waved his hand dismissively. Look, sir, whatever charity case you're trying to play, do it somewhere else. This girl doesn't belong here. The man took one slow step closer to him. And who decides where she belongs? I do, Mr. Collins snapped. I run this event. The man leaned in slightly. And you just made the worst mistake of your life, Mr. Collins laughed. Oh, really? And who exactly are you supposed to be? The man paused. The courtyard was completely silent now, every breath, every heartbeat, every camera waiting. He said calmly, my name is Richard Grayson. The name rippled through the crowd like sudden electricity. Some parents gasped, whispered. No way, that can't be. Mr. Collins' face turned pale, but he still forced a laugh. So what? He stammered. You think a big name scares me? Richard Grayson took one final step forward. I don't scare you, he said quietly. The truth does. And in that moment, everything was about to change. The name Richard Grayson fell into the courtyard like thunder hitting still water. For a split second, nothing happened. Then whispers erupted like wildfire. That's impossible. Isn't that the billionaire who funds half the city's schools? The Grayson Foundation. He never shows up in public like this. Parents stood up slowly from their seats. Some covered their mouths. Others grabbed their children protectively as if they had just realized they were standing in front of a living legend. Even the teachers looked stunned. But none of that mattered to Amara. She barely understood the name. All she knew was that this stranger was standing between her and the people who had shattered her soul. And for the first time that day, the fear inside her chest began to loosen its grip. Mr. Collins, however, remained frozen where he stood. The color drained from his face in stages, first pale, then gray, then sickly white. He forced an unconvincing laugh. That's funny, he stammered. You expect me to believe that you're the Richard Grayson, the billionaire philanthropist? Richard didn't raise his voice, didn't smile, didn't threaten. He simply reached into his suit pocket and pulled out his phone. With one tap of the screen, the large LED display behind the stage suddenly flickered. Then, without warning, the image of Richard Grayson appeared on the screen, standing beside the mayor, cutting a ribbon, opening a hospital wing, donating millions. The crowd gasped in unison. Mr. Collins staggered backward as if the ground beneath him had turned to water. This can't be happening, he whispered. Richard locked eyes with him. It's happening, he said calmly. And you are standing in the middle of it. Mr. Collins' knees buckled slightly. His voice cracked. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. You didn't need to know who I was, Richard replied coldly. You only needed to know she is a child. Amara looked up at him slowly. Her eyes were wide with confusion and disbelief. Are you mad at me too? She whispered. Richard turned to her instantly, the steel in his eyes melting into something gentle and warm. No, he said softly. I am proud of you. Her lips trembled. For what? For still believing in kindness. Even after the world tried to teach you cruelty. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. He reached down and picked up the fallen card from the stage floor, the one that had been kicked aside. He carefully unfolded it. His eyes scanned the words. To the man who protected my family when my father could not. Richard's breathing hitched. Something deep and painful stirred in his chest. He looked at Amara again. Who were you trying to give this to? Amara hesitated. I didn't know, she admitted. My teacher said to bring a father or guardian, but I don't have one. I thought maybe, her voice cracked. Maybe God would choose one for me. The courtyard fell dead silent. Richard closed his eyes briefly, then he stood up straighter, holding the card in his hand. You already chose, he said quietly. Mr. Collins suddenly burst into frantic pleading. Sir, please, he begged. This was all a misunderstanding. Children are cruel, you know how it is. I was just trying to keep the event organized. Richard turned on him like a storm. No, he said coldly. You were trying to protect your schedule, your image, and your comfort at the cost of a child's dignity. Mr. Collins dropped to his knees. I'll apologize, he cried. I'll apologize to her right now. Richard didn't stop him. Mr. Collins turned to Amara desperately. I'm sorry, he blurted out. I didn't mean it. It was just a joke. I went too far. Please forgive me. Amara stared at the man who had humiliated her. Her small hands clenched inside Richard's jacket. Her voice was barely a whisper. You laughed when they hurt me. Silence. Mr. Collins had no reply. Richard exhaled slowly. He lifted his phone again and pressed one button. Within seconds, 4 sharply dressed men appeared at the edge of the courtyard. Security. The crowd parted instantly. Mr. Collins' eyes widened with terror. What's this? He stammered. Richard didn't look at him. You're fired, he said calmly. Gasps tore through the crowd. You run this event under a foundation funded by my company, Richard continued. As of this moment, your access, your position, and your reputation are revoked. Mr. Collins collapsed forward, sobbing. The guards stepped in and lifted him up. You can't do this, he screamed. You can't ruin my life over one little girl. Richard finally looked at him. His voice was quiet. You ruined her life for one moment, he said. I'm ending yours for a lifetime of cruelty. The guards dragged Mr. Collins away as his screams echoed into silence. Richard turned back to the crowd. His voice was calm, but it cut like a blade. Every adult who watched this happen and said nothing, he said, sweeping his gaze across the parents and teachers. You were part of the harm today. No one could meet his eyes. Silence in the face of cruelty, he continued, is cruelty itself. The words settled heavily over the courtyard. Then Richard turned back to Amara. He knelt in front of her once again. You came here today for medicine, didn't you? He asked gently. Amara froze. How did you know? He smiled sadly. I saw the coins fall from your pocket when you stepped on the stage. How much is the medicine? $40, she whispered. Richard reached into his wallet and pulled out a thick stack of bills. He placed them in her trembling hands. This is not for your brother's medicine alone, he said. This is for your family's survival. Amara burst into sobs. But I can't take this, she cried. That's too much. Richard gently closed her fingers over the money. You already paid for it, he said softly. With your courage, she shook with emotion. Why are you doing this for me? She whispered desperately. Richard hesitated, his eyes darkened with memory. Because someone once did it for me, he said. A teacher slowly stepped forward. Mr. Grayson. She said nervously, what will happen to the girl? Richard didn't hesitate. She is coming with me, he said. Gasps shot through the crowd. Amara's eyes widened in fear. With you, she whispered. But my mama, my brother. Richard placed his hand gently on her head. They're coming too. The entire courtyard erupted into stunned murmurs. Amara stared at him as if she were dreaming. You mean all of us? Yes, he said simply, all of you. Her knees gave out and she nearly fainted from shock. Richard caught her just in time. And in that moment, the little girl who had entered the courtyard alone left it under the protection of one of the most powerful men in the city. The courtyard remained silent long after Mr. Collins was dragged away. His screams faded into the distance. But the weight of what had just happened stayed heavy in the air, pressing down on every adult who had stood by and watched a child suffer. Richard Grayson turned slowly toward the crowd. You may continue your celebration, he said calmly, but remember what you witnessed today. No one clapped, no one laughed. The Father's Day celebration ended without another word. Amara had never been inside a real hospital before. As Richard's black car glided through the city streets, she sat stiffly in the back seat, clutching the money to her chest like it might disappear if she let go. Her voice shook as she asked, Are our hospitals free? Richard glanced at her through the mirror. They are today, he said softly. When they reached Eastwood Alley, neighbors gathered outside Amara's home in confusion as Richard lifted Eli gently into his arms. The boy was burning with fever and barely conscious. Naomi tried to stand but collapsed forward in panic. My son, please, he's dying, she sobbed. He's not dying today, Richard said firmly. He's going to live. The hospital staff moved immediately. Doctors rushed Eli through emergency doors. Naomi clung to Amara in the waiting room, shaking violently. I was so scared, Naomi whispered through tears. I didn't know what to do. Amara hugged her tightly. Before the hour was over, a doctor stepped out. It was a dangerous infection, he said, but we caught it in time. Naomi collapsed to the floor sobbing in relief. Amara cried too. Richard stood silently nearby, watching a family rise from the edge of despair. The next morning, every television channel carried the same headline: Billionaire fires event coordinator after public humiliation of child. The video had gone viral overnight. Mr. Collins' employers issued a public apology. An investigation was opened. He was charged with child abuse and public misconduct. Within 48 hours, he lost his job, his reputation, and every sponsorship tied to his name. Justice was not slow. Justice was immediate, and it was unforgiving. When Amara and Naomi were discharged from the hospital, they found Richard waiting outside. A driver opened the door to a sleek black SUV. Naomi hesitated. "I don't understand why you're still helping us," she said cautiously. "We can never repay you." Richard shook his head. "This isn't a loan," he replied. "It's a promise." "A promise of what?" "That no child under my watch will ever suffer alone again." He looked at Amara. She risked everything for her family. That kind of courage deserves more than survival. He handed Naomi a folder. Inside were documents, a house deed, medical insurance, education contracts. Naomi gasped. Sir, I can't even read half of this." Richard smiled gently. "You won't need to, I'll explain everything." By sunset, Amara and her family stood in front of a small white house with a blooming garden. Amara stared in disbelief. "This is for us?" Naomi covered her mouth as tears poured down her face. "I've never owned anything," she whispered. "You do now," Richard said, "and it's just the beginning." Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and warm food. A nurse was already waiting inside for Naomi's treatment schedule. Another doctor later confirmed she would fully recover with proper care. Amara wandered from room to room in stunned silence. Each step felt unreal. In the smallest bedroom, she found a desk, books, a backpack, school uniforms folded neatly on the bed. Her name was stitched into them. She turned slowly to Richard. "You knew my size." "I knew your future," he replied. She burst into tears and ran into his arms. "I've been scared my whole life," she sobbed. "I didn't know if tomorrow would ever be good." Richard held her tightly. "It will be now," he said. The conversation that changed everything that night. Amara sat beside Richard in the living room as Naomi and Eli slept peacefully nearby. "Why do you really help kids like me?" Amara asked softly. Richard was quiet for a long moment, then he spoke. "When I was your age, I lived on the streets, no parents, no home, no food." Amara looked up in shock. "You?" "Yes," he nodded. "And one day a woman bought me a sandwich. That one act saved my life." "Just a sandwich?" "Yes," he smiled faintly, "because it showed me I mattered." Amara whispered, "You're being my sandwich." Richard laughed gently. "No, I'm being your second chance." The promise before leaving that night, Richard knelt in front of Amara one final time. "I won't be your father," he said gently. "No one replaces the man who gave you life." Amara nodded. "But I will be your guardian," he continued. "Your protector, your supporter." Her eyes shined. "Like the card I made?" Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out her crumpled card. "I'm keeping it forever." She smiled wider than she ever had before. 5 years had passed. The streets of Eastwood Alley were still noisy, dusty, and full of the same stubborn struggles of life. But inside a bright white house with a garden blooming in colors Amara had never imagined, a small miracle had taken root. Amara Johnson, once a timid 12-year-old with a trembling voice and a trembling heart, had grown into a confident, intelligent, and radiant young woman of 17. She no longer walked with her head down. She walked tall, shoulders squared, and eyes gleaming with hope and determination. She had gone from living in a one-room home with peeling walls to attending the city's best private high school, one funded in part by the Grayson Foundation. Eli, now 9, laughed freely, no longer coughing through the night with fever. Naomi's health had fully returned thanks to ongoing medical care. And Richard Grayson, the billionaire who had stepped into their lives on that fateful Father's Day, remained a constant presence. Not as a distant benefactor, but as a mentor, guardian, and unwavering supporter. It was a sunny Saturday morning. Amara carried a tray of breakfast outside to the garden where Richard sat reading the newspaper. Eli chased butterflies nearby, giggling. Naomi tended to the small vegetable patch she had started, her hands caked in soil but her eyes shining with pride. Amara set the tray down. "Good morning," she said brightly. Richard looked up and smiled. "Morning, Amara. Sleep well." "Better than ever," she replied. He gestured to the tray. "You made breakfast." "I wanted to," she said, carefully placing a plate in front of him. "It's just eggs and toast, but I tried." Richard chuckled. The effort matters more than perfection, thank you. Amara paused, glancing around the garden. It feels unreal sometimes. I still can't believe all of this is real. Richard folded his newspaper and leaned back. You think it's unreal because you once lived with nothing. But nothing never meant you weren't worthy. You always deserved this life. You just needed someone to believe in you when no one else would. Her eyes welled up with tears. You believed in me when everyone else laughed her voice cracked. When they made me feel like I didn't matter, you stepped in. Richard's voice softened. Because every child deserves to be seen, Amara. Every child deserves safety, love, and hope. That day, I only did what should have been done by others. I only did what was right. Amara smiled through tears. You didn't just save me, you saved my whole family. Richard shook his head gently. No, you saved yourself. I just gave you the tools. Later that week, Amara stood at the podium in front of her entire high school. She had just won the Excellence in Leadership Award for her volunteer work in the city's underprivileged neighborhoods. As she glanced into the audience, she spotted Eli waving frantically, Naomi clapping proudly, and Richard giving her a subtle thumbs up from the back row. Taking a deep breath, she addressed the crowd. When I was younger, I thought courage meant having no fear, she began. But I learned that true courage is standing up even when everyone else is laughing at you, even when you feel invisible, even when the world seems determined to crush you. It is choosing kindness, choosing hope, choosing to fight for what is right, no matter what. A soft murmur of appreciation ran through the audience. She looked directly at Richard, her heart swelling with gratitude. And sometimes, she added with a small smile, it takes someone else believing in you to remind you of your worth. The applause was thunderous. She thought back to that Father's Day, the laughter, the humiliation, the fear, and now to this moment. The journey from despair to hope had been long, but it had transformed her into someone stronger, braver, and more compassionate than she had ever imagined. Later that evening, the family gathered in the living room. Naomi had made tea. Eli sprawled on the carpet with a new book. Richard sat on the couch, reading quietly. Amara joined him, setting her award beside him. Do you remember the first day I met you? Amara asked softly. Richard looked up, smiling faintly. How could I forget? You were terrified, trembling, and yet you had the most beautiful courage in your heart. I thought I was going to fail, that I was worthless, she said. You were never worthless, he replied. And today you remind the world of the same lesson. Courage and kindness always matter. They change lives. Naomi smiled, reaching out to hold Amara's hand. You've come so far, baby. I'm so proud of you. Eli looked up with wide eyes. I want to be brave like Amara when I grow up. She ruffled his hair gently. You already are. Richard's voice carried softly from the couch. And remember, a single act of courage, like a single act of kindness, has the power to change the world. Never underestimate it. Amara's heart swelled. The little girl who had once stood trembling on a stage, humiliated and alone, now sat surrounded by family, safety, and love, her future limitless. The transformation of Amara Johnson was more than wealth or comfort. It was proof that humanity transcends race, poverty, and fear. It was proof that one person's act of courage and kindness can rewrite the story of someone's life. Richard had stepped in, yes, but it was Amara's courage, her unwavering spirit, and her belief in goodness that had made her worthy of being saved. And in the end, the world had witnessed something powerful. Even in a moment of despair, hope can arrive. And hope can arrive in the most unexpected of forms.